Hello, this is Josh and you're watching a video tutorial on blindhog.net. Today we're going to continue with the PSTN tutorial that we started a few weeks ago. Um, we're going to actually configure a dial plan on the PSTN router. And the configuration is kind of a three-part deal. We're going to configure Cisco Unified Border Element to allow the branches to make calls to the other branches using H323, and the cube used to be called IP gateway. So calls from one branch to the other will be able to route through the PSTN router. We will also configure a very stripped down version of Call Manager Express, and on my laptop I'm running Cisco IP communicator that's going to register to the PSTN router, and it will have 5 lines on it: 911, one line in the area code of this branch, one in the area code of this branch, and one here. And from the PSTN phone, you can make calls from each of the lines into the branches, or route calls through the branches to the PSTN phone. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is configure the Cisco Unified Border Element. Voice service VoIP, and then do allow connections. H323 to H323, and I'm going to go ahead and, because I'm going to use SIP later on, I'm just going to go ahead and configure all of the H323 to SIP and SIP to SIP back and forth. Okay, the next step is to create a loopback interface. On each one of the routers, I'm going to create a loopback interface so that we can have a standard source address for VoIP traffic. Okay, so the PSTN router is going to be 10.255.255.1 with a 32-bit subnet mask. The headquarters is going to be 11, branch 1 will be 12, branch 2 will be 13, all with the 10.255.255 network. Okay, now we're going to configure the H323 gateway commands to designate this loopback interface as the VoIP interface for H323 traffic. Okay. The next step, I'm going to configure static routes to each of the branches for their loopback interfaces. I missed a dot. Okay, and now we're going to configure the dial peers. The first dial peer we're going to configure is just for best practices. It's the incoming dial peer. Okay, so This dial here is strictly for incoming call legs. So we want to set the DTMF relay, we want to set the codec, and we're going to set no VAD, or no voice activity detection. And the reason we're using G711 as the codec is because we have no DSPs to compress or to do any kind of transcoding. Okay. The next dial pair we're going to configure is for calls to branch 1 or to the headquarters. And some people prefer to use a fictitious, area code or prefix. I personally like to use something that's, at least looks a little bit more realistic. So I'm making up my lab to say that the headquarters is in New York, branch 1 is in San Jose, and branch 2 is in Dallas. So I'm using area codes accordingly. So 212 is a New York City area code. Setting the session target to 10.255.255.11, which will be the loopback interface of the headquarters router. Okay. And I'm going to continue on configuring the dial pairs for branch 1 and branch 2. Alright, so we have the dial pairs configured now. The next step is to configure Call Manager Express, and this is going to be a very stripped down version. Basically, it's just going to have an ePhone DN or ePhone DNs with numbers and then attached to an ePhone, so there'll be no call forwarding or anything else that's normally associated with Call Manager Express. Let's use the telephony service command. Set the max DN to 20, max ePhones to 20, set the IP source address, and I'm going to set this to the IP address attached to my local area network. So 10.10.10.253 for 2000. And we're going to configure the first ePhone DN, and the number is going to be for 911. The second ePhone DN is going to be in the New York area code. This is going to be in the San Jose area code. This will be in the Dallas area code. And also, I mean, feel free to use your imagination on these dial plans. I know that not everyone is in the U.S. that's watching this, so if you know, use a dial plan that is specific to your country or what you're familiar with, or you can just use the one that I'm doing. But you know, feel free to make it your own. And ePhone 5. I'm just using country code 55, and then just making something for an international call. Okay, now let's configure an ePhone. Let's configure a MAC address for it. So on IP Communicator, you can specify custom MAC address. So I have a custom MAC address that I always use. Set the type to CIPC, and if you're using a different hard phone, configure it with the type that you're using. And let's configure the buttons. So button 1, use ePhone DN1. Button 2, ePhone DN2, button 3, 4, and 4, 5, and 5. So the ePhone DN configuration is very simple. Okay, and the last step is to configure or to make changes to the preferences on your IP communicator. So go to Preferences, Network. You can see that the MAC address that I have specified on my IP communicator matches the MAC address that I configured on the PSTN router. I'm going to change my TFTP server to .253, and I can't tell you why I have to configure the same address on TFTP server 1 and 2 on my phone. Doesn't make sense to me either. Okay, now you can see that our PSTN phone has 911, New York phone, San Jose phone, Dallas, and an international number. Well, that concludes this tutorial. And come back to blindhog.net for more video tutorials. Thanks.